I think it's time we do a build, a Z270 build after the Ryzen release. This is a Steam Castle Micro ATX case from Deepcool. The thing that I like about this case is that the Micro ATX motherboard mounts horizontally, which is very nice for working on the system. We're going to use the Strix Z270G Gaming from Asus that I reviewed a while back, along with some G-Skill DDR4 3200 memory, Samsung SSD, a Corsair power supply. We're going to stuff it in this thing. We're going to swap out some video cards. We're going to do some testing with the 1080 Ti and maybe some benchmarks so that we can compare to other platforms. So that should be neat and interesting. Deepcool is ahead of its time with the Steam Castle, originally released I think in 2014 or 2015. It's got built-in RGB, but the RGB controller normally is controlled by the button on the side. We're going to hook it up to the Aura controller on this Strix motherboard from Asus, because we're crazy people. Let's get started. Okay, the first thing that we're gonna do is pop the side. Now on the inside it comes with standoffs for ITX installed. However, we can add some more standoffs for Micro ATX. Now this cabling we're gonna need, so I'm just gonna set that aside for now. Now I've already mounted my processor, my modest heatsink, and installed the RAM, so this should be pretty easy. Really, I probably should install my power supply first, but we're gonna do the other thing first. And that's pretty much it. Now we just need to screw it down. Well, we need a couple more standoffs actually. It comes with this handy standoff applicator. Now as you can see, I've got ample clearance for a tower cooler or whatever other kind of crazy cooler I might want to put in here. I've even got room in the top for a radiator. But mainly I'm concerned with having enough room for a big ass graphics card right here. I am gonna have to pop the other side off just to be able to do cable routing a little easier. Here you can see the built-in RGB controller, USB 2 and USB 3. Now, it would be nice if there was an upgrade kit or something for this for USB 3.1 Gen 2, 10 gigabit, as this Asus motherboard has a USB 3.1 Gen 2 connector on the motherboard. Good Lord, what a rat's nest of cables. Now, another nice thing about this case is that it does come with a huge fan mounted in the front already. So that's a nice value. And this is the connection for our fans and RGB on the top. This is the back of the case. As you can see, it's a pretty intelligent layout. You've got room for your power supply here and extra cabling and sort of in front of it. There's two 2.5 inch bays to the side of this, and then you get two 3.5 inch bays in front. And so that sort of leaves a little pocket on this other side for cables. Now do note that I've mounted my fan down, which will pull air in from the bottom, and we've got this cool little dust filter. So this little dust filter will take care of this stuff from the power supply. Now power supply cable routing is a little bit of an art, because I mean look at this. This is crazy. This power supply is not modular, and that's okay because it was inexpensive, but you've got all these extra cables that you got to do something with. Now there's just enough clearance between the back edge of the case and the motherboard that I can just do this with the CPU power connector, which is pretty nice. Now the motherboard cable is much thicker, and I don't think I can get away with that. So I'm gonna route it through this hole. Okay. Now with the side off like this, I've got a little bit of room to get my screwdriver in here and get this thing screwed down, because it's way not screwed down right now. And this is pretty much the perfect location. This is one of my RGB headers. I think I can build an adapter to go from the built-in case adapter to this, but I'm gonna come back to that later. Great, that gives us a nice secure mounting. Now one thing is that this Micro ATX motherboard actually has two M.2s, and the other M.2 is on the back of the motherboard. I have not installed an M.2, so it's gonna be really problematic if I ever wanna install that M.2, because there's no easy way to get to this. But honestly, that's probably okay. So it's basically almost toolless. Gotta do this. Have little mounting pegs for our SSD. So it just snaps right in. You've got it there, you're good to go. Now it just needs power. Now I'm gonna separate our PCI Express power cables from the rest, because we need to route those separately. And actually I'm gonna use the same hole that I went through for the motherboard. Have those go out just like that. Now for this fan, I'm gonna connect this fan right there. And this is a DC fan, but I'm not worried about control because Asus's fan header stuff, DC PWM, no problem. Now the nice thing I like about this is if I did need to use the 3.5-inch drive bays, I could put all the cabling back here and use all this for the power for the 3.5-inch drives. But since I don't have any, I'm just gonna stuff that out of the way. And that'll just be our little secret. Oh, I'm embracing my inner Bob Ross. Now there's this rat's nest. Now what is this and this? This is for external fan control. I'm not gonna use this. I'm not gonna take it off. I'm just gonna bundle up the wires so it's a little neater. Okay, that should stay out of the way mostly. Then these are our front panel connections, so those can go somewhere. This is our front panel audio. That's gonna need to be like kind of routed, like, gosh, I don't know. Not sure what the best way to do that one is. I think I'll save the front panel audio for last. Then we've got USB 3, which is sort of located like over there. So that should be okay. And then here's our USB 2. It's also sort of located over there. And this is power. Now I can go ahead and hook up power down here. Okay, so that's got power. Now for now, I'm just gonna reconnect the header to the top, but I'm gonna revisit that control through the motherboard thing a little bit later. Okay, so these all just kind of route through the front here. And I'm just gonna put this side back on for now. And we're gonna come back to that. All right, let's turn this around and take a look at this rat's nest. There's our PCI Express power. Just gonna lay that there. I've got a rear fan. I've got a rear fan connector conveniently located right where it should be. Just gonna tuck that out of the way. Got our USB 3. Unfortunately, because again, not USB 3.1, gotta sort of cram this in there. Now, I might be able to route it through the top here a little bit more efficiently, but this is probably okay. Oh, do you notice what I forgot to do? I forgot to run a SATA cable to the other side, so we're gonna have to get in there anyway. But that's okay. It's our USB 2.0 header. And this is our AC97 audio. Now this one is kind of problematic. I think coming up right here honestly would be best. See, if you route your AC97 audio cable too close to your graphics card, you can pick up a lot of noise from the voltage switching circuitry in your video card. So I think by running the analog audio cable below the motherboard tray, because the motherboard tray is metal, it's going to be a little bit more noise immune than it otherwise would have been. Maybe the front panel connections the same, just because those are, you know, I get that those may not have a good aesthetic or whatever. So let's run those the same way. All right, now while we're in here, let's do the SATA cable. And now we've efficiently routed our cables. We should have enough slack on these cables once I close the other side. Okay, we just barely have enough slack on our HD audio cable, and then our front panel connections are right here on the corner. So I can see, like honestly, this case layout is by far the easiest for hooking up front panel connections because the front panel connector is right there. And that's pretty much it. This is a basically ready to go system. Now it's got built-in video so we can test it, install, you know, whatever operating system we want. And we are basically good to go. Notice you've got extra clearance on top here. So you could theoretically install another 2.5-inch drive, or this area could be used for cabling. So that's a good thing. And that's our finished computer. Well, we've got to add a graphics card, but more or less finished. Oh wait, I almost forgot the most important thing. No, I didn't forget about the RGB. Now this motherboard has an RGB controller, but the RGB on the motherboard is different than the RGB output of the printed circuit board that's part of the Steam Castle case. It's not really a big deal. The output from the motherboard is 12 volts, you know, on your R, G, and B channels, but the output from this control board is only something like 5 volts, and so you'll need some current limiting resistors. I modified a CD-ROM audio cable to bring down the 12 volts into something like 4.5 volts when all the LEDs are on, and I still didn't quite get the RGB order correctly because the order of the pins is not quite the same. You just have to fiddle with what order the pins are in. But if you got a multimeter or a current resistance meter, you know, a voltmeter, whatever, you can totally figure that out. If you get stuck or whatever and you're working on that project, come to the Level 1 forum and it'll be fine. But yeah, RGB control directly from the motherboard on this case. Woo! Blam! It works. Look at that. And we get the cool RGB on top. And I visually inspected all of my fans are working. So when you're building a PC, it's really not super complicated. Once you get it together, you make sure that all the stuff works, all the ports work. So, you know, plug a USB stick, keyboard, whatever, and all the USB ports to make sure they work. Make sure that all your fans are spinning. Check your temperatures. Make sure that your CPU is not getting super hot. Most of the time you can check in the UEFI. Then you install your operating system. Linux, Windows, Mac OS, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Could be anything. And that's really all there is to it. If you haven't built a computer before, but you've been thinking about doing it, maybe you're going to save a few bucks. Maybe you're going to, you know, upcycle some older equipment. You can get Sandy Bridge machines for practically nothing. And, well, they're not bad. They're still not bad 5 years on. So, you know, maybe even something newer. So that's been a really quick Kaby Lake i7 7700K build. I've got to install a whole bunch of benchmark software and prepare this thing for a 1080 Ti. Now when it comes time for the graphics card, literally I'm just going to slide it in the side and pop it in. There's a retention clip at the back of the case. It's not going to be a big deal to install a graphics card. And those two PCI Express power connectors are just barely enough power for that 1080 Ti. So this should be a pretty good system overall when it's done, although the 1080 Ti is not going to stay in it. Probably this machine will end up with like a 480 or something like that. Hell, we might give it away. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We've got stuff we've got to do with it in the meantime. So I'm Wendell for Level 1 Techs. I'm signing out, and you can find me in the forums at level1techs.com. See ya.